everyone has a little bit of ADHD. Every man and his dog is considered autistic these days. These are some statements that you have been hearing quite more often than not these days, not just as a healthcare professional, but even as a regular human being in this digital age where the concept of being neurodivergent has really been spreading all over the internet, social media, and if you have kids in schools and even in the workplace. And as a result of that, if you are an ESL healthcare professional, there is no excuse for you to not get educated and become more aware of what being neurodivergent actually is, because a very good chance is that your patients, many of them may also be in the spectrum. Therefore, you need to have the skills, the knowledge, and the competency to be able to provide inclusive and equitable and accessible care to them in order for them to get the best health outcomes. So in this video, I'm going to be covering how you as an ESL healthcare professional can overcome your existing biases, taboos, and unwilling ignorance to educate yourself more about the nuances of being neurodivergent. Welcome back to my channel, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. I know it has been a while since I've actually posted a long form video. For a very long time, I was actually experimenting with the YouTube Shorts. Now that it's given the limit of over 3 minutes or around that. So I just thought, let's do something different and explore this topic in much more detail. It's something that I have done before in previous videos as well. Now, for those who are new here, my name is Shweta. I'm the founder of Healthy Dynamics. I'm a coach who helps ESL healthcare professionals who have just moved to an English-speaking country or are considering doing so in the future, improve their communication skills so that they can build better trust, influence authority with their patients, ultimately to receive testimonials, glowing 5-star reviews, referrals, and progress in their career globally and otherwise. So a little bit of a backstory. 2 weeks ago, I actually got my diagnosis of being ADHD and having level 1 autism. I even made a post about it on LinkedIn, which you can look at over here. And it sort of put a lot of the pieces of the puzzle in my life together. So as a person, I have in a lot of social, professional, and group-based settings, I have always been considered to be a difficult person. And when my diagnosis sort of came to me, it all started to make sense. And I had this aha moment, this light bulb moment, and so much clarity. It went on to explain why I'm not able to retain or maintain long-term employment. Why do I struggle to fit in to a social group? Why do I sort of push away or end up upsetting so many people when I speak my mind and say the truth? And when I realized that this is because of the quirks and traits that I have being a neurodivergent woman with autism and ADHD, it made perfect sense. And unfortunately, I come from a culture which is Southern Asian, which is still very unwillingly or willfully ignorant, tabooed, and it's almost stigmatized when it comes to talking about being neurodivergent, because people like me, or even especially kids, they are the ones who are considered the outliers, the black sheep, the ones who, are just a pain in the asses, and just in general, they won't listen, they won't comply, they won't cooperate. It takes them a very long time to learn and process things. They're very slow, and they're often perceived as being rude, close-minded, lazy, incompetent, every name under the sun. Now, I'm not going to go into how neurodivergence, there are so many brilliant minds in the world who are neurodivergent. Everyone knows that. But as an ESL healthcare professional, you might be in a very similar situation, because even though you may have some idea or some realization that your patients may be neurodivergent, but the issue is that you have come from a culture where these concepts are very tabooed and frowned upon and stigmatized to talk about openly. And so, and especially in your cultures, when you are expected to conform to societal, cultural, religious norms, the concept of someone just being, literally the black sheep when everyone else is white can sometimes be a very threatening thing for not just you, if you're neurodivergent yourself, but also for your patients. And therefore, treading across this landscape can be quite challenging and daunting. However, I'm going to have to tell you this, and it's going to be a difficult truth, but you have to absolutely hear it. Whether you like it or not, neurodivergence is slowly becoming the norm. Nowadays, not just because it didn't exist many years ago, but it's because now we have the awareness, the tools, as well as the knowledge, know-how, and not just the technology, but also the resources to help people recognize that, the composition, the wiring, the chemistry, and the programming in their brain is very different to that from what you see in the masses. So instead of such patients, they can come across as being difficult, and you might be challenged a lot by these patients. I remember when I used to work with my psychiatrist back in the day, I used to push back and challenge him a lot. And I have made videos about this in the past, and I have also made videos about neurodivergence in general and why it's applicable in this day and age. I'm going to link those two videos at the end of the YouTube video screen. But the reality is that these difficult patients are more than likely neurodivergent. And if you don't understand, what makes them who they are, you will misread their behavior, misinterpret their communication, and unintentionally damage their trust in you. And as it is, neurodivergent people are severely let down in every aspect of society, be it in friendship circles, in the school, in workplaces, and especially in healthcare. You don't want to make it worse. And, as an ASL healthcare professional, you are already navigating across fields such as language differences, cultural expectations, time pressure, and patient anxiety when you're working in an English-speaking setting. And when you add neurodivergence into the mix, it sort of throws everything into a new spanner altogether. And neurodivergence includes, people like me who have ADHD, who have level 1, 2, or 3 autism, people who have sensory sensitivities, and people who just interpret and process things around them and the world differently. It's not that they are dumb or stupid or ignorant, they are just different. And that is why the standard model of communication that I or anyone uses typically with patients doesn't work anymore. And when it breaks down in these situations, healthcare professionals will just resort to saying that this patient is non-compliant, they're not listening, but the chances are that they are overwhelmed, confused, overstimulated, or struggling to process the information in the way that you are delivering it to them as a healthcare professional. And the problem here is, therefore, mismatched communication. Now, why is neurodivergence harder in certain communities? Now, like I mentioned previously, in cultures such as many of the ones that you may be coming from, which is more traditional or collectivist, this is highly stigmatized. So children who are autistic, even in this day and age, are labeled as being weird, quirky, having a lot of idiosyncrasies, strange, and difficult. Whereas people who have ADHD, they are considered to be disrespectful, lazy, disorganized, and even too emotional. And women like me, who are autistic, we've always been told that we are more sensitive. And I agree that I've always been a very sensitive person, and the fact that I'm now diagnosed as neurodivergent, it makes perfect sense. Now, instead of recognizing neurological differences, people are pressured to conform, to mask, to hide in order to appear normal. I had to do that for many, many years of my life, and I highly regret it. And also because that's the only way I wanted people to see me and see my worth and whatever else. So therefore, that's why the stigma actually follows people in the healthcare settings, including clinicians themselves, which means that healthcare professionals are treating neurodivergent patients without even being trained in order to recognize the signs that they may be neurodivergent, or if they are, how to communicate with them appropriately. In the training that you may have received as a healthcare professional is that you have, chances are you have learned about things like anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, procedures, but almost no time is spent teaching clinicians about how different brain processes communication. Now, obviously, if you are an occupational therapist or a psychologist, you have a baseline knowledge, or even physiotherapists. I've been speaking to a lot of physiotherapists lately, and they are also being trained on how to work with neurodivergent patients, which I find absolutely incredible and innovative. But otherwise, even if you're, say, a GP or an endocrinologist or a surgeon, you are generally not taught how to communicate with patients who are just neurotypical, but let alone patients who are neurodivergent, it becomes a very different ballgame. The reality is that neurodivergent patients may need more processing time. They struggle with rapid verbal explanations or even complex written informations. I have that problem, for example. They feel overwhelmed by very strong sensory environments, be it light, sound, crowds, noises, anything like that. They interpret language very differently, and they experience a lot of anxiety when they are being rushed. And you have to be very observant as an ESL healthcare professional to recognize and observe these patterns in your patients. Because if you don't, you might end up assuming that they just don't care and they're not engaged. But the reality is that these patients process the information that you're giving to them in a very, very different manner. And another few reasons that you as an ESL healthcare professional may be struggling to identify whether or not your patient may be neurodivergent, they may do these things. They ask very detailed questions. Case on point, I'm one of them. They struggle with eye contact. They appear anxious or overwhelmed. They ask you to repeat instructions, and they need a combination of written and verbal instructions. And they can appear more sensitive and emotional during consultations, and they need a lot of space to process their emotions. And this is not because they are being non-compliant, rude, they are stupid, dumb, or they lack interest. They are adaptive responses to the sensory overloads or processing differences. I can speak firsthand, these are challenges that I have frequently experienced in any setting, socially, in workplaces, and even in healthcare settings. So, what can you as an ESL healthcare professional do better in terms of how can you as an ESL healthcare professional do better in terms of providing the care and creating an environment for your patients that is inclusive and accommodating and showing a good understanding of how neurodivergent patients operate? So it is your responsibility, obviously, is to continuously invest in your professional learning, growth, and development. Not just about new treatments or medications, but about the people, in this case your patients, that you serve. That means you need to ask yourself, what assumptions do I hold about neurodivergent people? Do I see them as capable individuals, or do I view them unconsciously as being problematic? Have I taken the time to educate myself about being neurodivergent? There are plenty of books, podcasts, and even look into your some training at your workplace. So collaborate with people who work with neurodivergent patients on a regular basis. So your occupational therapist, your physiotherapist, your psychologist, psychiatrist. These people have much more knowledge than anyone else in different fields of healthcare. So collaborating with them can be a fantastic strategy. So this is a good way to not operate from the long-held stereotypes that you may have heard growing up about being neurodivergent. Professional maturity means being willing to update your beliefs when new knowledge becomes available. Like I said before, educate yourself. Learn about being neurodivergent, what being neurodivergent is from credible sources. Become curious instead of judgmental. Observe patterns in your clinical practice when you see patients who are behaving a little bit differently than what you normally see. And one thing to know is that pattern recognition is something that everyone needs to be very good at, and people who are neurodivergent like myself are like the experts in pattern recognition. So you could actually learn a lot from your neurodivergent patients. And in the process, you may start to notice things you may have missed before. And if you want to understand how to communicate more effectively with neurodivergent patients, I'm going to link the 2 videos that I spoke about towards the very end of this video. So remember, healthcare is evolving, our understanding of the human brain is evolving, and as ESL healthcare clinicians, you have a responsibility to evolve along with it. Because sometimes the biggest barrier to care isn't in the language, but it actually is the beliefs that long-held beliefs that you had that you never questioned or changed to begin with. So hope this video was useful to you. As usual, if you want to stay in touch with more videos that I post, I'm trying to do this on a weekly basis now. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Look at the videos on neurodivergence that I will link towards the end of this video. And as always, thank you very much for your time, attention, and presence. I will see you very soon. 2 videos over here and another major blind spot